The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the heat. It was the silence. Every morning, my backyard echoed with birds splashing in a simple rain barrel I had built beside my vegetable garden. The tomatoes were thriving, the herbs smelled fresh, and my small orchard was greener than anything else in Maple Creek Estates. Then, one Tuesday morning, I found a bright red envelope taped to my front door. Not mailed, not placed politely in my mailbox. Taped directly to the wood like someone wanted the whole neighborhood to see it. Across the front, in bold black letters, were the words, "Final HOA violation notice." I hadn't received a first notice, or a second, just a final. I laughed. At first, I figured it had to be some clerical mistake. I had lived in Maple Creek Estates for nearly 9 years without a single violation. My lawn was trimmed every Saturday. My fence was freshly painted. The flowers in front of my porch won the neighborhood gardening contest twice. Surely this was an accident. I opened the envelope. My smile disappeared. "Dear homeowner, your unauthorized rainwater collection system violates Community Appearance Regulation 8.14 concerning unapproved exterior utility structures. You are hereby ordered to remove all rain barrels, storage tanks, connecting pipes, and irrigation equipment within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in fines beginning at $500 per day." Signed, Victoria Langley, President, Maple Creek Estates, HOA. I read the letter 3 times. Then I looked toward the backyard. 3 rain barrels, dark green, hidden behind a cedar fence. You literally couldn't see them from the street. They collected runoff from my roof and watered my vegetable garden through a simple drip irrigation system. Nothing leaked. Nothing smelled. Nothing looked ugly. They simply saved water. I folded the letter and shook my head. There has to be a mistake. My golden retriever, Cooper, wagged his tail as if agreeing. I grabbed my phone and called the HOA office. Straight to voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Again. Nothing. Finally, I decided to drive over. The HOA office looked as polished as ever. Fresh flowers. Expensive stone entrance. Perfect landscaping. Inside, the receptionist barely looked up. "Can I help you? I'm Daniel Carter. I received this violation notice." She glanced at it. Oh, she recognized it immediately. "You'll need to speak with Mrs. Langley. Is she available?" "No." "When will she be?" "I'm not sure. I'll wait." "I'm afraid you can't." Daniel frowned. "Is she in the building?" The receptionist hesitated just long enough to answer the question without speaking. Then came the familiar voice. "Mr. Carter." Victoria Langley stepped into the lobby wearing an immaculate white blazer and carrying a leather folder under one arm. Everything about her screamed control. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect hair. Nothing ever looked out of place, including the expression she wore whenever someone questioned her authority. "I understand you have concerns." Daniel held up the notice. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There hasn't. My rain barrels are legal. They violate community standards. They're behind a fence. They're still prohibited." "Where exactly?" She opened her folder. Section 8.14. Daniel scanned the page. It mentioned generators, satellite dishes, visible fuel tanks, construction trailers. Nothing about rainwater. "I don't see rain barrels." Victoria smiled. "The board interprets water storage containers as exterior utility structures." "So, you made that interpretation?" "The board did." "When?" "Recently." "Was there a homeowner vote?" "No." "So one day something legal suddenly became illegal?" "Our responsibility is protecting property values." Daniel couldn't help laughing. "Property values? My barrels are hidden. They're still against policy. They save water. They're still unauthorized. The county encourages rainwater collection. This is private property under HOA jurisdiction." Dayton sighed. "So you're fining me $500 a day because I conserve water?" Victoria's smile never moved. "You have 72 hours. She turned and walked away. Conversation over. That evening, Daniel sat on his back porch watching the sun disappear behind the trees. His neighbor, Linda Morales, leaned over the fence. "You got one too?" Daniel looked surprised. "You did." Linda nodded. "Beside of my compost bins." "What?" They've been there 6 years. Daniel laughed bitterly. So it's not just me. No. Across the street, another neighbor walked over. Marcus Hill, retired firefighter. Friendly. Straightforward. They told me to remove my solar-powered irrigation timer. Daniel blinked. Seriously? Marcus nodded. Said it wasn't architecturally approved. The three neighbors exchanged confused looks. Something wasn't right. This wasn't normal enforcement. It felt personal. The following Saturday, Daniel decided to inspect the neighborhood. Street after street. House after house. Something caught his attention immediately. Several homes had decorative rain barrels. Some were visible from the sidewalk. One family had 4 giant storage tanks painted blue. None had violation stickers. Daniel photographed every single one. Then he stopped in front of the largest house in the community. Board member Richard Evans lived there. His backyard gate happened to be open. Daniel froze. Inside sat 2 enormous rainwater storage tanks, twice the size of his own, connected to a full irrigation system. He snapped several photos, then another, and another. So, a voice interrupted him. Richard Evans stood behind him, holding a cup of coffee. Taking pictures? Daniel didn't lower the phone. I thought rain barrels were against HOA policy. Richard glanced toward his backyard. Oh, those are temporary. Temporary? Yes. They've been there over a year. Richard's smile disappeared. You should mind your own property. Daniel folded his arms. I'd love to, if your HOA would stop inspecting mine. Richard stepped closer. Be careful where you point that camera. Daniel smiled politely. I'll remember that. That afternoon, Daniel created a folder on his laptop. HOA evidence. Inside it, he saved photos, violation notices, emails, property records, community regulations. He didn't know exactly why, only that something felt wrong. Very wrong. Meanwhile, the weather forecast appeared on television. Another week without measurable rainfall. Experts warn reservoirs are approaching historic lows. Residents are encouraged to reduce water usage immediately. Daniel looked toward his rain barrels. They were nearly full from spring storms. Enough water to keep his garden alive for weeks. He couldn't shake the strange feeling that those barrels were about to become far more important than anyone realized. As the evening sky turned orange, Cooper barked toward the street. A black SUV rolled slowly past Daniel's house. It didn't stop. It simply drove by. Then again. 30 minutes later, it passed a third time. Daniel watched through the window. The driver never looked away from his property. Someone was watching. Daniel stood frozen behind the living room curtains as the black SUV slowly disappeared around the corner. For several long seconds, he didn't move. The vehicle hadn't simply driven past. It had crawled by his house 3 separate times, and each time the driver had kept his eyes fixed on Daniel's property. A chill settled deep in his chest. This wasn't about an HOA violation anymore. Someone wanted him to know he was being watched. Cooper, his loyal golden retriever, let out a low growl near the back door, his ears standing alert. Daniel checked every lock before walking through the house one last time. He looked out each window, scanned the backyard, and even shined a flashlight along the cedar fence that hid his rain barrels. Nothing. The neighborhood was silent. Yet something felt terribly wrong. Sleep barely came that night. Every creak of the house made Daniel open his eyes. Every passing car made him glance toward the window. When dawn finally broke over Maple Creek Estates, he felt exhausted. He opened the front door to collect the newspaper. His stomach dropped. A bright orange envelope was tightly zip-tied to his front gate. Across the front were the familiar words. Final HOA compliance notice. Date in sight. They're not wasting any time. He cut the zip tie and unfolded the notice. His expression changed instantly. Attached to the letter were several close-up photographs of his backyard. Every rain barrel, every irrigation pipe, every storage connection. The pictures had clearly been taken from above his 6-foot privacy fence. Daniel slowly looked toward the sky. A drone, he whispered. Someone had flown a camera over his property. Instead of calling the HOA, Daniel grabbed his laptop. He transferred every photograph, every violation letter, and every email into a folder labeled HOA evidence. He had no idea if he would ever need it. but his instincts told him to document everything. Later that afternoon, Daniel drove to the monthly HOA board meeting. The parking lot was overflowing. Normally, only a handful of homeowners attended. Tonight, nearly every chair inside the community center was filled. The atmosphere felt tense. People weren't chatting. They were angry. As Daniel walked inside, Linda Morales waved him over. "You too?" she asked, holding up another violation notice. Daniel nodded. "What do they cite this time?" "My compost bins." Marcus Hill joined them. "They ordered me to remove my solar-powered irrigation controller." Daniel frowned. "They're targeting everyone who's trying to save water." Before anyone could respond, HOA President Victoria Langley entered the room. The conversations stopped instantly. She walked confidently to the podium. "As many of you know," she began, "the board has recently increased community inspections to ensure compliance with neighborhood standards." A man near the back stood. "Standards? You fine me for planting drought-resistant grass." Another woman stood. "You cited my vegetable garden after 8 years." Voices began rising throughout the room. Victoria remained calm. "Our responsibility is maintaining property values." Daniel slowly raised his hand. Victoria looked directly at him. "Yes, Mr. Carter?" Daniel stood. "I have a simple question." He placed several printed photographs on the table. "If rainwater collection violates HOA policy, why does board member Richard Evans have 2 rain storage tanks twice the size of mine?" The room became completely silent. Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Victoria glanced at the photographs before speaking. "The board does not discuss individual properties." Daniel smiled. "You've discussed mine several times." A wave of laughter swept across the room. Victoria's smile faded. "Those photographs were obtained improperly. So were the ones attached to my violation notice." The room erupted again. People began demanding answers. "Are you spying on homeowners? Did the HOA use drones? Who's paying for all these inspections?" Victoria slammed her gavel repeatedly. "This meeting is adjourned." She quickly gathered her papers and disappeared through a side door while frustrated homeowners shouted after her. Daniel realized something important. People were no longer afraid. The following week, the weather became unbearable. Day after day, temperatures climbed above 100 degrees. The local reservoir reached its lowest level in decades. News stations interrupted regular programming with emergency announcements. County officials have declared mandatory Stage 3 water restrictions. Residents were ordered to reduce outdoor water use immediately. Sprinklers stopped running. Parks turned brown. Garden centers closed early because plants were dying faster than they could replace them. Yet Daniel's backyard remained green. Not because he ignored the restrictions. Because months earlier, he had prepared. Every drop of rain stored in his barrels was collected legally from his own roof. His gravity-fed drip irrigation system used almost no water. While other gardens withered, his tomatoes ripened. His peppers flourished. His peach tree was covered with fruit. Neighbors began noticing. One afternoon, 73-year-old Eleanor Brooks knocked softly on Daniel's door. She looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry to bother you." Daniel smiled. "You never bother me, Eleanor." She held up 2 empty watering cans. "My husband planted our roses before he passed away. They're dying. I was wondering." Daniel didn't let her finish. He carried the watering cans to his backyard and filled them. No charge. No questions. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." Word spread quickly. Within days, several neighbors quietly asked if they could have a few gallons for vegetable gardens or fruit trees. Daniel agreed. He carefully limited how much each family received so everyone could benefit. He wasn't selling water. He was helping neighbors survive the drought. For the first time in weeks, the neighborhood felt united. Unfortunately, the HOA noticed. Victoria Langley watched from her office window as residents walked away from Daniel's house carrying watering cans. She folded her arms. "This has to stop," she muttered. Richard Evans nodded. "Leave it to me." Neither of them realized someone standing outside the office had overheard every word. The next morning, Daniel stepped into his backyard with a cup of coffee. The mug slipped from his hand. Water covered the grass. Thousands of gallons had flooded across his yard and into the storm drain. His rain barrels were completely empty. The hoses connecting them had been sliced cleanly with a sharp blade. Cooper barked furiously near the fence. Daniel rushed over. The cut was too perfect to be an accident. Someone had entered his property during the night. Someone had deliberately destroyed his emergency water supply. As he examined the ground, something caught his eye. Half hidden beneath the wet grass lay a broken piece of black plastic. He picked it up. It was part of a drone propeller. Daniel slowly closed his hand around it. A determined smile replaced his shock. "They made one mistake," he whispered. "They left evidence." And, for the first time, Daniel wasn't planning to defend himself anymore. He was going to expose the HOA, no matter what it cost. Daniel Carter stared at the broken drone propeller lying in his palm. Whoever had emptied his rain barrels had been careful, but not careful enough. "This is the mistake that's going to bring them down," he said quietly. Instead of calling the HOA, Daniel called someone else. Private investigator Sarah Bennett. Sarah had spent 15 years investigating insurance fraud before opening her own firm. She listened carefully as Daniel explained the violations, the drone photos, the mysterious SUV, and the sabotage. When he showed her the broken drone part, she nodded. "Someone wanted to destroy evidence," she said. "But they left evidence behind." For the first time in weeks, Daniel felt he wasn't fighting alone. Over the next several days, Sarah quietly interviewed neighbors. Almost everyone had a story. Linda Morales had received 5 violations in 1 month after posting complaints about the HOA online. Marcus Hill had been threatened with legal action because he refused to remove his irrigation controller. Eleanor Brooks had been fined for keeping 2 small rain barrels hidden behind her garage. One by one, homeowners produced letters, emails, and photographs. Sarah spread everything across Daniel's dining room table. "This isn't random," she said. "They're targeting anyone who questions the board." Daniel looked at the growing pile of evidence. "And now they're destroying property." Sarah nodded. "That makes this much bigger than an HOA dispute." Meanwhile, the drought grew worse. The county announced emergency water deliveries to several nearby communities. News helicopters showed dry reservoirs and cracked lake beds. Local television stations began searching for stories about families adapting to the crisis. A young reporter named Emily Ross heard rumors about a neighborhood where an HOA was forcing residents to remove rainwater collection systems during historic drought. She couldn't believe it. The next morning, she knocked on Daniel's front door. "I'd like to hear your side of the story." Daniel hesitated. Sarah spoke first. "I think it's time." Emily spent hours interviewing residents. She filmed Daniel's damaged irrigation system. She spoke with Eleanor beside her dying rose bushes. She interviewed Marcus in front of the notice, ordering him to remove his water-saving equipment. Most importantly, she requested an interview with HOA President Victoria Langley. Victoria refused. That evening, Channel 8 News aired the story. Neighborhood HOA orders residents to remove rainwater systems during historic drought. The report spread rapidly online. By morning, it had been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. People across the county were furious. The pressure on the HOA intensified. County officials announced they would review whether the HOA's actions violated local water conservation policies. Several attorneys contacted affected homeowners. Then something unexpected happened. Board member Richard Evans requested an emergency meeting. Daniel attended with dozens of neighbors. Victoria entered the room looking nothing like the confident woman everyone knew. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. Reporters waited outside. Camera crews filled the parking lot. She cleared her throat. "The board has decided to suspend all drought-related violations." Nobody applauded. Daniel slowly stood. "What about the homeowners you find?" Victoria remained silent. "What about the damaged property?" Still nothing. Then Sarah stepped forward and placed a folder on the table. "I think everyone should see these." Inside were copies of security camera footage obtained from a nearby house. The video showed Richard Evans carrying a drone late at night. Another clip showed him entering Daniel's backyard through an unlocked side gate. A third video captured him leaving less than 10 minutes later. The timestamp matched the night Daniel's rain barrels had been emptied. The room fell silent. Richard's face turned pale. Victoria looked at him in disbelief. "You told me you only inspected the property." Richard couldn't answer. Instead, he lowered his head. "I panicked," he whispered. "I thought if the barrels disappeared, everyone would comply." Gasps filled the room. He had just confessed. Within days, everything unraveled. Richard resigned from a board. Victoria stepped down as HOA president after members voted to remove her. The HOA's insurance company agreed to reimburse homeowners for damaged property and refund every drought-related fine. A new election was held. This time, residents chose board members who believed in transparency instead of intimidation. Marcus Hill became vice president. Linda Morales joined the architectural committee. Daniel refused every nomination. "I don't want power," he told his neighbors. "I just want fairness." Several months later, the drought finally ended. Dark clouds rolled over Maple Creek Estates one quiet afternoon. Then the rain came. Not a brief shower. A steady, soaking rain that lasted for hours. Children ran through puddles. Neighbors stood on their porches, smiling as water rushed through gutters. Daniel watched as fresh rain filled his new rainwater collection system, this time fully approved under the HOA's updated guidelines. Dozens of homes now had similar systems. The neighborhood had learned an important lesson. Preparedness wasn't something to punish. It was something to encourage. As Daniel looked across the street, he saw Eleanor's roses blooming once again. Marcus waved from his driveway. Linda smiled while checking her vegetable garden. The community finally felt united. Cooper barked happily as the rain continued to fall. Daniel looked toward the sky and smiled. Sometimes the strongest storms didn't destroy a neighborhood. They revealed the people willing to fight for it.
Subscribe the channel and press the bell icon for new updates.